Black Lives Matter and the 93%. Riots in Rochester over the holiday weekend. Trump loves our military, despite what the media says. And Kamala Harris is proud of Jacob Blake. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. Great to have you here with me. I did miss all of you for a few days there. I felt like I needed a couple of days away, so I went out to Montana. And in preparation, I even rewatched The Hunt for Red October because you will recall one of the senior officers in that movie, played by Sam Neill, says he wants to live in Montana, the Russian guy. And it's kind of weird in that movie how they have all these, well, American and Scottish, in the case of Connery, actors playing these Russian guys like they couldn't get Russian actors. But I did get to see Montana, unlike Sam Neill in The Hunt for Red October. Spoiler alert. And I will tell you, it was an interesting respite from my urban existence. It was beautiful, lovely state, and let's just say that I'm excited to be back in the fight with all of you. Let's get right to it. We have riots occurring. Oh, what a surprise. More riots over the weekend. I tried to be off of social media for a few days. I had a couple of breaks where I said, okay, I've got to see what's going on. And you had the usual, of course. You had the insanity in Portland, the absurdity in Seattle, the lunacy in Pittsburgh, and then also riots in Rochester. You think, well, what is going on with that? Why are we all of a sudden seeing riots in Rochester? But this is a reminder, friends, that this movement, so to speak, and to call it a movement, I think, is to give it too much credit. But this entire apparatus of activists are sometimes from the area in which they protest, but often not. They bring in these auxiliaries of insanity, and they destroy areas, they destabilize, they undermine cities, they undermine towns. It doesn't matter where you are across the country. And sure enough, support for BLM as a movement, in the latest polling I saw, is well below where it was before the series of protests and riots and looting after the George Floyd police incident. One that we now also look back on and think more critically about exactly what happened there, because we were all rushed to judgment. All of us were, including me, including everyone in conservative media. You had to say, well, it did look awful, and that's true. It did look awful, but we didn't know all the facts. But that's the whole point, isn't it? You're pushed to make judgments about all this stuff. You're pushed to make determinations without anybody able to step back and say, hold on a second. Shouldn't we allow the process to play out, at least to the point where we get all the very pertinent and necessary facts? I mean, you don't necessarily have to wait for a jury verdict, right? But you could at least wait until you know the basics of what's going on. But we couldn't even do that. Not allowed. Not allowed. And now we see that there's no way the left is going to stop these protests. There's no way they're going to shut down this movement. I don't know if they could, even if they want to, and it's certainly not clear that they want to. So what does that leave us with? Well, now they're trying to convince us that it's mostly peaceful again. You'll notice that in the recent few weeks or so that we've been talking about this, the narrative overall has shifted numerous times. We've gone from, oh, it's Trump causing the riots, to what riots, to, okay, fine, maybe they're riots, but they're not that bad, to now the latest thing that I'm seeing is that, oh, they're 93% peaceful. And there are folks out there who are dumb enough that they share this, thinking that somehow that's a convincing argument. 93% of all BLM gatherings across the country, I was seeing this all weekend, are considered peaceful according to these statistics that are out there. You see it all over the place. Okay, and this is some analysis they've done. I'm not even going to contest whether the number's 93 or if it's 75 or who cares. Doesn't matter. Even if it's 93, there have been a couple of hundred riots and looting. Portland alone has had close to 100 days now, I believe, of riots. So what does that tell us? Why would anyone think that that's a compelling argument? It's not. It's simply not even in the least bit a compelling argument in favor of BLM. 100% of Tea Party protests a decade ago were entirely peaceful. So why is it that we're supposed to clap for BLM for being 93% peaceful? As I've explained before, you know, the time when Lincoln was at the theater was, by the seconds you could count off, 99% nonviolent. It was 99% nonviolent, you know? I'm sure, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer ate actual food 99% of the time, but that doesn't really matter, does it? That doesn't really change your perspective on what someone has done, whether they are deserving of your respect or your consideration or not. You know, if someone said, well, 99% of my life, I'm not a murderer, you'd say, well, that 1% really matters a lot, doesn't it? But it's just propaganda. It's just a lie. It's just another way of pretending, giving people a statistic that's meant to be, well, it's irrelevant, and it's meant to be a shield against the very obvious, which is what the public is finally figuring out now. I mean, a lot of us have known for months that this was terrible and that Black Lives Matter makes everything worse for everyone. But now at least there are people that weren't necessarily convinced early on, that were socially pushed, were coerced, were shamed into thinking that this movement was in fact all to the good, that it was going to make things better for people. And then we turn around and say, well, hold on, look at what it's actually done. And there was this video over the weekend of a protester. I see it. That's the problem. We need better terms. Rioter works, but, you know, vandal, barbarian. We need terms of excellent disparagement for what goes on in places like Portland and Rochester. We need to make it clear that we have disdain, specific enough so that we know who we're talking about with these individuals, but that it also has a clear pejorative, right? I mean, calling them Antifa, for example, that's what they want to call themselves. We should come up with something better than that. We should have names for these idiots that we use, other than just calling them idiots, which is somewhat useful in and of itself. But one of them out in Portland was going to throw a Molotov cocktail at police, an incendiary device that, in case anyone's wondering, is in fact a weapon of war. It was devised specifically for a war. The Finnish, very short duration but quite nasty fight with the Soviets when they invaded during the Second World War. And that's where Molotov was the foreign minister, the Soviet foreign minister, and the Finns named it a Molotov cocktail to tell everybody exactly what they thought of this guy who was pushed for the invasion, along with, of course, the Central Committee. But a Molotov cocktail is a weapon of war, and this guy used it. Tried to use it on police and ended up dropping it and lit his own legs on fire. And he's running around. It's all on video. You can see it. It looks like a total moron. I mean, it's as dumb a video of somebody who's supposed to be a protester as you'll find. And I just want to know, I would want to ask this individual, what the heck do you really think you're doing? What do they think they're accomplishing with any of this? I mean, obviously the guy who lit himself on fire in that moment probably is having some second thoughts about being a glorious revolutionary. But what really is going on here? What do they think they're doing? Who do they think they're helping? Same thing I'd want to ask about the videos circulating of BLM protesters walking around with a bullhorn in Pittsburgh and screaming at people, random people on the street. Why is that acceptable? Who thinks that that's in any way to be promoted, in any way honorable, decent behavior? I mean, I think it speaks volumes about the character and decency, or lack thereof, of BLM protesters, their idiotic belief that shouting in people's faces with loudspeakers while they eat somehow serves justice. It's really about feeling the rush of power from intimidating strangers as part of a mob. That's what this is really motivated by. That's what's going on here. The people that are doing these protests, the people who are behind all of this, they're not in any way advancing the cause of justice or police reform or anything else. This is about them. They're throwing a tantrum, and they like going around yelling at people. They feel powerful, right? This is the emboldening of the mob, and the Democrat Party is the party of the mob. That's not new, but that's why it's emotions over data and reason and fact and argument and logic. Because mobs don't rely on those things. Mobs don't operate in that context. What does the mob want? Whatever it wants when it wants it. Go along with it, and you are powerful. Stand in front of it, and you will be torn down. The Democrats really are the party of Barabbas. I mean, they are absolutely crazed with their anti-Trump hatred, and that's why they know they can't control the left-wing base. That's why the protests and riots and looting that are going on in all these cities. And over the weekend, it was Seattle, Rochester, Pittsburgh, Portland. This is a lot of cities. Oh, but 93% peaceful, they tell us. Well, that's remarkable, isn't it? You know, for 364 days of the year, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively, were, doing pretty well back in 1945. But, there was one bad day, right? I mean, you can do this. You can try to obscure the truth here any number of ways, but we can all see exactly what's going on. The Democrat Party is in a constant fit of perpetual rage and tantrum throwing. There's a childish anger behind all of this, too. They don't get their way, and so they're just going to demand and spit and scream and cry, anything they have to do. And then they turn around and think they're sophisticated and they're moral and they're adult. Then they turn around and suggest that Donald Trump is a bad person who hates the troops. That's really the line of attack now. As I told you before, and this will be a theme today, it'll be a theme every day we do this show until the election, they're going to try everything. It's the kitchen sink opposition to Trump. They're going to throw everything they've got at this guy. You're going to hear Russia redux. You're going to hear about women that, claim that Trump grabbed at them 30 or 40 years ago, whatever it is. No proof, no support for it. It doesn't matter. You're going to, the 25th Amendment, Trump is actually not of sound mind. They're going to throw everything they've got at him. And even after all that, if the American people choose Donald Trump for 4 more years, the left will not accept it. We don't have to ask them if they won't accept the results of the election. They've told us, and we already know. And even if they lied and said they would accept it, still wouldn't believe them. That's what this country is heading toward right now. So get ready for it, my friends. Strap in, shields high. What does COVID-19 have to do with you losing your home? Well, you see, cybercrime is up 75% since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, according to the FBI. And your home's information, your home's title, it's online. So here's what the bad guys do. They get your information, then they use a quitclaim deed to push you off and put themselves on your home's title. It's so easy. You'd be amazed how quickly the bad guys can do this. And then they stick you with the payments. Perhaps you don't even find out about this until you get a foreclosure notice on your home. Take action today to protect yourself with Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com, code BUCK. That'll get you 30 free days of protection. You can also check to see at that site if you are already a victim of this crime and don't even know it. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection, and check to see if you're a victim.
The terms themselves are very difficult and loaded about what counts as destruction or violence and what you count as police use of force. And those definitions themselves seem to be at the heart over the sort of political and cultural battle over what the protests themselves mean.
That's absolutely right. And sociologists, social scientists more generally have had to come up with criteria where a protest that is, coded as violent is one in which there's significant injury or death or arson. But it's got to cross the threshold. And as you mentioned, 93% of these events have been peaceful. And that really has, I think, allowed the Black Lives Matter movement to capture a kind of moral high ground in the country in the larger debate.
Okay. So this is really the game we're going to play, huh? 93% of BLM, as I've been saying, they claim is peaceful. But, Pearl Harbor, for 364 days of 1941, 364 out of 365, was a very beautiful place. Great weather. There was one really bad day on December 7th. But, other than that, Pearl Harbor was, a pretty quiet, peaceful place. Yes, there was the aftermath. How about this? 11 out of 12 months of 1941, Pearl Harbor was a great place to be. Lots of sunshine. There was one bad month. Come on. 1 out of 12? Big deal, right? This is what they're doing. There's going to be no end to this. Just prepare for this. The lies they will tell to you, the way that they will make you think, how could it be possible that I disagree so much with people who seem so certain, and that they claim the facts are on their side during all of this is even more astonishing. They want you to question what you know to be true. Just like in the old Soviet Union, one of the great methods of control was to have you lie about the little things. Right? In totalitarian societies, they don't just want you to bend the knee when the emperor, so to speak, rolls on by. They want you to admit that bread is a potato. They want you to think that up is down. They want you to be incapable of separating lies from truth in your own mind just by inundating you with lies and by forcing you piece by piece, because of the coercion they use, to agree with the lies they're telling. Even if you know they're untrue, but eventually you will confuse yourself. Eventually you'll say, well, how many of these stories can they run? Are all of the stories they're saying about Trump lies? Are all of these things? And the answer is, depending on what we're talking about, with Russia collusion, for example, yes, it's all a lie. All of it. There was no collusion. It's a figment of their imaginations. It's a fabrication. But they think, on the one hand, they will have make their followers very happy by doing this. And on the other hand, they will also force all of us to sit back and say, are we sure? That's what they want you to do. Just doubt it for a little bit. Doubt for a second. For a day, perhaps the day of the election, that what they're saying could even be true. And all they need is to accomplish that. And sure enough, it will be a success for them. They just want you to lose your faith in what you know to be true. And if you do that, then they're able to get away with all of this. Then the rolling blackouts in California, because, one of the richest places in the world, can't keep the electricity on. I guess it's not a great idea to run an economy on windmills and hope. This is what they don't want. You to look at what's going on in the country right now and make rational, reasonable judgments about which party has shock troops out in the streets, threatening people, screaming in people's faces, ruining their days. I mean, it's scary when a mob starts screaming at you and screaming curses at you. A normal American, a normal person is going to say, this is really unsettling. Look, it would be scary for me, be scary for any of us, because, you might think, well, Buck, I'll go punch them in the face. Well, first of all, if there's 50 of them, I don't care how tough you are, you're going to have a problem. And second of all, it's even in the reaction to this where you could get in the most trouble. It's you being caught on video screaming back in the face of a BLM protester. Oh, you'd say, but Buck, I would never, even use curses or any kind of improper language. Yeah, what are you going to do when they release a video of you trying to fight back and they say that you used a racial epithet? Oh, but Buck, I didn't do that. That's a lie. Exactly. The lie about you. They're going scorched earth. They don't care. There's no honor or decency in this movement. They want to control you, friend. And if they can't control you, they'll destroy you. We as a country face two pathways, right? We have a choice. We can go down one, we can go down the other. And increasingly, it's obvious that the BLM movement is a path of division, destruction, divisiveness, hatred, rage, perhaps the dissolution of our society. That's what BLM offers. They have no solutions. They have nothing to promote that will make lives better, that will save lives or make us happier, make us more prosperous, make us more free. And when I say us, I mean the American people, all of us, of every race, creed, and color. They have no solutions. They pretend to sometimes to give their lib journo accomplices something to say. Oh, but they want greater transparency. They want a national database of police violence. What's that going to do? We already have national database national database that the FBI collects for that breaks down crimes by race, crimes by sex, by gender. And here's an interesting little piece of data to keep in mind. If you're going to just base everything on the numbers and not look at what's actually happening, not look at who's doing what, just say, well, hold on a second. We have a huge problem in this country with the murder laws being disproportionately applied to men. Men are being accused of and convicted of 90% plus of the murders in this country. So I guess the murder laws must be anti-male. It must be misandry, I believe, is the term. I always forget that one. No, that's a stupid thing to say, right? That's a dumb position. But increasingly, that's what's going to happen with data. Why are some groups committing more crimes than others when you break it down statistically with the FBI? Here's another one. Why do white males commit so many more crimes than Asian American males in this country? I don't have an answer for you, but it's not because the laws are biased against white males in favor of Asian males. That's not true. But no one will ever we can look at this, you can see what's going on here, but no one can ever have a real discussion about what's really happening in any community right now. Because we have these narratives around them. We have narratives that tell us that what we see and what we know to be happening isn't really what's happening. There's something else going on here. There's a system, you see. There's a systemic racism behind all of this. An invisible hand holding some people, not just holding them down, pushing them into crimes, pushing them into violence. Oh, that's a claim that you will recall the liberals were advancing back even in the 70s. Poverty, government failure causes violence. Just not true. There are, in fact, many countries all over the world that have tremendous poverty, very low crime rates. Poverty doesn't cause crime. Could be a contributing factor to it, but many things are a contributing factor to it. Ultimately, we either hold individuals responsible for what they do, or if we create narratives that absolve them of responsibility because it's politically convenient, we begin to erode our justice system entirely. We start to kick down one of the most important fundamental organizing principles of our entire country, which is that everyone is to be held to account under the same laws, and the laws apply regardless of who you are. We know libs think that's all a big joke, that's all ridiculous. Anyway, they don't really care about any of that. But you have a view of what's happening in the country right now that we should be very clear on what's being said. Ilhan Omar, for example, takes this position on what we are seeing in America today. Play 26.
As we speak, we are in the midst of an ongoing uprising over centuries of racial neglect and oppression. We can't talk about the protests in Minneapolis or Kenosha or sports teams nationwide without first looking inward. We maintain a system that grinds millions into desperate poverty, a system that doesn't provide the most basic necessities like food, shelter, and medicine, whether they are brutalized by police, by austerity economics, or by politicians who simply do not care about us. Our nation is crying out desperately for change. We need to fundamentally change the way our society treats its most vulnerable, because this has gone long enough.
What country is she talking about? when you listen to this is a sitting member of Congress, very famous, very well off. I mean, wealthy by any global standard, by any American standard. Members of Congress make $168,000, something like that, a year, and they can make a little more depending on leadership roles, etc. But what country is she talking about that's holding down millions of people in poverty? I'm curious. I know she thinks she's talking about America, but here you have a minority female refugee who is a member of Congress, who's now a rich public representative. And she's talking about how there's all this oppression, and she mentions government figures who don't care enough. And I want to say, you mean like the Democrat Party? Because they're in charge. If you want to look at places where there is a lot of poverty and despair among minorities in particular, among racial minorities, you'll find that Democrats are in charge, really without exception. So who are the politicians who don't really care? We have a massive welfare state in this country, and there are state welfare agencies that go along with it too. How much more are we going to spend and do? What's too much? Doesn't answer any of these questions. But more to the point for me, look, you can pull up everything. It's just the worst kind of demagoguery. Right? This is socialist and racial demagoguery from a sitting member of Congress. That's what she's doing. This is what the Democrat Party is obsessed with these days, because they also don't have any ideas to make people better off, make us more prosperous, make us richer. You know, I'm trying to do some small business maneuvers in New York State, for example, and I'm really getting a taste of it now, and I've known about it for a long time. It's just endless bureaucratic BS. Just paperwork and this and that and expenses and fees and file here and ready. They make it impossible. And Democrats think, what, this is helping? No, it's just give more money to the state. You know, I'm paying these fees so that, lazy representatives in the teachers union can get paid $250,000 to make sure that your kids go to subpar schools, but that the adults don't have to work too hard who teach them, right? I mean, that's really what's going on, at least in New York. Democrats don't have any ideas that are make things better for us. They don't know how to improve this country that we all share. No, they just benefit from exacerbating the politics of envy, making everyone feel like they can only advance at the expense of others, and with the state being the one that makes those determinations. The state must hold some down to elevate others. That's the real plan. That's the goal. And if you believe Ilhan Omar understands anything about the economy or really anything about America, I got a whole new line of thinking for that person. It's just not true. An ongoing uprising, though, an uprising usually has, this is what Ilhan Omar said, an uprising, it usually has a specific purpose. Centuries of racial neglect and oppression. Okay, what is required now? What are we supposed? There's only one kind of discrimination over race that is in our law that our government engages in, and is in favor of predominantly, but not entirely, black and Hispanic racial minorities in this country. Also Native Americans. I mean, there are a few other groups. That is the only legalized discrimination by race that exists. That's it. So they're telling us now that there's an uprising. An uprising to what purpose? What do they want? A larger welfare state? What are people who are paying into this welfare state supposed to think about it? Just growing and growing. Not ending poverty. The war on poverty has been a failure. But increasing government dependency in this way, what are they to think? What are the conclusions they're supposed to take from this? Individuals are not responsible for their own actions. There's a very straightforward, and social scientists have looked at this many times, a very straightforward program for not being in poverty. You know what it is? I'm sure you've heard it before, but just to review. Finish high school, don't have babies before you get married, and when you're married, stay married. That's it. I think across all racial categories in this country, if you do those three things, you have something like a 90% chance of not being in poverty, of effectively having a middle-class life or something close to a middle-class life, having a comfortable enough existence. Eating good food, living in a nice house, living in a house, safe place, and paying your bills. You have a 90% chance of that. Now, no system is perfect, right? And that's another problem that we're constantly dealing with the Democrats. Like our police, they're not perfect. But she speaks about police brutality as though it's some daily occurrence. Here's what the Democrats won't concede right now. Sometimes police violence is necessary and justified. We transfer, as a society, we put in the hands of cops the right to use violence under certain circumstances in our collective name. Because otherwise, we're all going to start walking around concealed carry or, carrying whatever weapons we prefer, and it's just going to be Mad Max out there. Right? There's a reason why the police carry guns. And there's a reason why citizens should also be allowed to carry guns. But, of course, the usage of state violence in order to enforce the law, this is the basis of a nation state. It's like they don't teach poli-sci 101 anymore to Democrats. Oh, it's just all Marx. It's all Marx. It's all this angry, godless loser whose ideas have done more harm to the modern world than really anybody else. That's what they're teaching your kids now in school. That's what they think the way forward should be. So we're told there's an ongoing uprising, and it's because of police violence and brutality. Where does this uprising end? And to call it an uprising is, of course, meant to confer a kind of political legitimacy on it, right? Like the reason people are going into stores in Chicago or in New York. I know there was more looting in New York over the weekend, too. I can't keep up with all the looting and rioting that's going on. But the reason that there's that's occurring, that people are going in and stealing sneakers from a store, is because of centuries of oppression. That's what we're told. No really bright person with good judgment believes that, but it's an excuse. It works for them. And the brainwashed lib masses, they do believe it. They'll think, oh, sure. That's absolutely why there's coordinated looting of high-end stores going on. That's absolutely why lunatics on the West Coast are practicing with umbrellas in a kind of phalanx formation, like they're, Leonidas at Thermopylae when the police decide that they're going to send in the riot formations to shut them down. I mean, they look like these Antifa, they look like total morons all the time. These are also losers all the time. These are not people that you'd want as friends, as neighbors, to be around you. They're all Democrats. Don't get trapped into this thinking that they have their way and we have our way. I've become more partisan over the last 10 years because the left has become more insane. I've become more disdainful of their beliefs because I've seen in practice what they're willing to do and how they play the game and what their end goal is. And they're not the same. They keep moving further to the left. They keep radicalizing and expecting all of us to treat them as though they're the same old Democratic Party. I refuse to play that game. And I also refuse to accept that there's, our two-party system. The best thing is it for always for it to be in balance. No, the best thing that could happen to this country right now is Donald Trump crushes Joe Biden. The Republicans hold the Senate and take control of the House. That is the best thing that could happen for America this fall. It won't make everything perfect. Won't make all of our problems go away. Of course not. But if you're looking for a positive outcome from our election, that's the only way that this improves. And that's assuming that they even accept that the election was legitimate, which I don't think is. I think we should plan for the opposite. And they're pretty much telling us that. There is another way. There's another way that this country can go. There's another approach to what is not a perfect place by any means, and one in which there are still racial divisions. Yes, there are still racists. The system is imperfect, but we can try to make it more perfect while also holding each other up, supporting one another, showing each other respect, obeying the laws, treating each other with decency and honor. That is the way this country could go. but only if the left's insanity is defeated. UFC fighter Bobby Green went viral over the weekend, and I've got to say, I'm not somebody who watches a lot of UFC, but I do think it's important to support people who share what matters to you, and not just view these view athletes, professional athletes, as though nothing they say really matters. It's all just about the entertainment, because they're forcing us to view their politics now. Well, if you're going to take action in a negative sense against some people, you've also got to take action against those, or take action in favor of those who speak out and share your values. Here's a really powerful statement from UFC fighter Bobby Green. Play one.
Come here.
I was going to bring...
Yeah. So we've been fighting right now in this time in our country. We're doing this whole Black Lives Matter. Everyone's fighting, everyone's looting. This is my father. I was born in foster care. I didn't have a mother or a father. They gave me away. My father wasn't fit to be my father. This is my dad here, Jacob Benny. He's been there since the beginning. He's done everything. He laid his life down for me, and I lay his life down for him. I don't judge any man on the color of their skin, but the content of their character. We're here. We love. It doesn't matter what color it is. It's all about love. You can't beat hate with hate. You beat hate with love. So everyone out there, please stop fighting. Please come together. We can't beat it that way. With love.
Think of what it would mean if Bobby Green wasn't a lone voice right now in professional sports saying this. Imagine how many people could be inspired, how many futures could be improved, perhaps even lives saved, if more professional athletes took this most American of messages, most inspiring of messages to their fans. But no, instead of Bobby Green's pathway to healing and a better America, which I think is clear to all of us, what we get are tantrums and lectures from millionaire celebrity athletes about how racist America is. Thankfully, Bobby Green's not one of them.